And start. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to April 9th. Year is flying by. April 9th, 2026. It's another edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. Lots of housekeeping we get done at the beginning of these, and then, we see where the conversation takes us. MSPinitiative.com. Follow everything we do there. That's where we post all of these sessions, which are recorded and posted to podcatchers and YouTube, and like, follow, subscribe, download, all that stuff. We also have a bunch of upcoming in-person events for the MSP community that we're coordinating. One is literally around the corner next week or this upcoming week, however you want to say that. We're working in conjunction with the Enable team, who is running Empower in Fort Lauderdale. So if you're going to be there at that event, or maybe you just happen to be in the area, right? Florida's a popular place with a lot of tech people. So if you're an MSP in the area, or you're going to Enable Empower, hit mspinitiative.com or log into the app for that conference. You'll find us in the schedule. Join us for a free block party for the MSP community. Fast forward a little bit further towards the end of the month, we're headed to Las Vegas. The good people at Kaseya Connect Global working with us to put on, or allowing us to put on the block party in Vegas at the Hakkasan nightclub inside of the MGM Casino and Hotel on the Strip there where the conference is at. So looking forward to doing our very first block party in Las Vegas. We've done a ton with the Kaseya team over the years, including all the DattoCons historically. So excited to get that one in the mix. And then fast forward, Kaseya puts on their European event called Connect Europe. So we'll be in Prague, the birthplace of the Pilsner beer, if you didn't know that. That's in June. We'll be doing a block party there. I'll definitely be Pilsner beer available. That much I can promise you. And then we will land at least to get us to the end of June, right? Which takes us to the midway through 2026. We'll be headed to Nashville with our friends from Roost, who run the Flow conference, and we'll be doing a block party in Nashville. So, recap: Fort Lauderdale, Vegas, Prague, Nashville. That takes us into the end of June. Then we reset the calendar again. We talk about what happens on the back end of the year, which we're actually in the middle of working on as we're speaking right now on this webinar, or podcast. So anyway, I digress. You can find all of that at mspinitiative.com, and looking forward to seeing all your faces over a beer or two in person, hopefully in one of those cities. So all of that's out of the way. I'm done with my housekeeping. Here we bring on our guest from PIA, David Schwartz. How you doing today, David?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, George.
Absolutely. So, PIA, definitely a familiar name in the sandbox, but David, I don't think we know a lot about you, or maybe the greater community hasn't met you yet. So this is a good time, maybe to give us a little bit of your background and tell the masses how you got to where you got to, and then we'll get into the other stuff.
Sure. Originally, I entered the job market at an interesting time in 2008. So probably the least opportune time to have any venture that I had intended to do from a career perspective. So that definitely threw a wrench in things for me. But ultimately, what I ended up doing is finding myself in the IT world. Um, and over time basically co-founded and built what I would call like a tech-enabled services business. So it was a blend of SaaS and managed services, heavily focused around mobility specifically. So mobile device security, mobile device management, lifecycle management, and so on. Um, did that for quite a while. And in 2020, we started, not related to COVID, but in 2020, we started having some conversations around what the next phase looked like and started kind of going and testing the markets to take in outside capital or potentially find the right strategic partner to acquire us. Uh, Went through that process for a little while. And then in 2021, actually eventually sold our business. And that was to, off the back of what we're seeing now is quite a big theme in PE-backed MSPs doing roll-ups and acquisitions and so on. So it's sort of I wouldn't say it was the first one, but it was sort of at the earlier stage of that the last 6 or 10 years. Um, so as part of that, I joined that company. We went on to do a bunch of exciting things, but ultimately, where I found myself was driving some strategic initiatives on the executive team there around M&A strategy, the types of businesses we were acquiring, how do you integrate them, how do you operate them under this now bigger corporate umbrella.
Hmm.
So a number of things like that. Really, really phenomenal experience. And then decided that I missed that like grindy entrepreneurial experience. Maybe I'm crazy for saying that, but I missed it big time. Um, and wanted to kind of like sink my teeth into doing that again. So I took a little bit of time off to assess, think about where I wanted to be, and got introduced to the folks over at PIA and, have been grinding at that and having the best time ever since.
That's awesome. Let's
Yeah.
just rewind for a second because that last part right before Pia is still front and center in the conversation, at least in the MSP sandbox, which is still a lot of money out there. And assuming that as the interest rate goes down, the people in the PE VC chair start to get a little bit more aggressive. At least from my experience, that's what I've seen. And there is a lot of MSPs who missed that last round, kind of off ramp at the end of 2021 when the market was probably at its peak, and like now have been kind of waiting and for the next window, right? And I think we're there, or we're almost there. I feel that's what people are telling me. I don't know what you think. Um, so I'm curious. There is this race. I was at an event a few weeks back, and the founder of Electric.ai was there, and he had, raised a lot of money around the idea that he could run an MSP with minimal staff and a whole lot of automation. And I feel like a lot of new versions of that have popped up and tried to raise money in the current day for whatever it's worth. But I don't know. Is the market the same, right? Think about the end of 2021 and think about now, 2026. Like, if you're an MSP that missed your off ramp, you've been waiting for the next window. What are the, well, like, is it going to be the same? Is the experience going to be the same? Is the hunger to, be a little bit more aggressive for these guys going to be the same? Lay the picture out for us.
Yeah, I think in this particular moment in time, I think there's a little bit of just a brief pause in the market in general. And probably, these private equity groups have a lot of basically dry powder that they have to put to work eventually. I think we're in this very brief moment, and hopefully it's only brief because of so many macroeconomic factors that we don't need to go through in this podcast, but are going to have just put a little bit of a halt in things. That said, I'm a believer that I think it's temporary, and I think you're right that if you look back to those who missed that 2021, 22 higher multiple valuation opportunity because rates were so low, I
Mm,
think we're going to start to see that come back. I also think that over the last few years, what we've seen are a lot of the really strong PE targets were acquired, and it's given smaller groups the ability to grow and develop that operational maturity and reach those new sort of like milestones that are now in that world where private equity is going to have an eye on them. I do also
so
think that the only thing I'll just say is I do also think that we've all become much more better educated as
mm,
MSP operators on what are the metrics and key things to be considering when we're running a business.
that's fair, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I heard Paul Dipple. I always call Paul Dipple in the back of my head, Dr. Doom. Every time you put a new metric out there, I'm like, I just spent all year trying to get to this last metric, and you changed everything in one thing. But are the roll ups? I always like to understand the guy who's spending the money, what his target is. Is the magic number for the guy buying up all these MSPs and kind of gluing them together? Is it still like 100 million ARR. Is that the magic number? I don't know if that's right. I've heard this a couple times. What is that magic number for the guy who sits at the top of that?
The magic number to go to or to start with?
No, to reach before
To
they
reach.
get
Okay.
to their goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it varies a little bit. I think what we've been seeing is a lot of these actual platforms have surpassed that pretty significantly at this point and have still not transacted. And so
Mhm.
a couple have, or a couple have, recapped and a number of things like that. So different strategies. I think we're sort of at the tail end of really seeing what happens. Like a lot of these have already been held for somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 years.
Mm.
And so we're sort of at like an interesting moment where I think we'll see what happens. And so I'm pretty eager to see how that all pans out. Um, Typically what I see is, you know, to have a platform to start with, you kind of have to have, call it 40 to 50 million in revenue. Um, at that point, is there a path in which you can grow organically with that business and in addition to that, acquire, call it another 40 to 50 million a year over the next 4 to 5 years? That's sort of like everybody's dream. Um, Assuming that the profit margins are the same. So that obviously varies, and which is just honestly a challenge in the MSP world in general, is having profit margins that can be sustainable at 15%, 20%, which is a hard thing to accomplish. So yeah, I mean, a lot of companies have exceeded 200 million now, right? And they're still growing and they're not slowing down M&A. And so I think that it'll be interesting to see what that point is. And then, thinking forward to build a business of that size, who are you going to sell it to? Right? Who's that private equity group going to sell it to? And so it'll be interesting to see what happens here because several of these have now exceeded that 150 million dollar mark by quite a bit.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. I was always curious what the guy at the top is going to do, but I assume that, I mean, I'm putting two and two together. If the window to buy more guys is going to open up here, hopefully in the next little bit to be more aggressive, then the window to sell the group is also going to open up, right? So two things can happen, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, I think the game that the platform companies are playing is, arbitrage, right? Which is, how do I buy something at 6 or 7 times my money and have it be worth the next day that that deal closes 12 or 14 times?
Wow.
Um, as an MSP operator, I think that's important context to have because I think it's a good indicator and guide to help you go. I know I'm not going to get 12 or 14 times, more than likely. So, but I do know that there's room to stretch that. And how can I design and lay my business out to make sure that it's reflective of where it can go and to get the highest valuation out of it?
100%. So back to the one thing that I pulled out of that, which takes me to my next topic is margins, right? The 15%. I've always, Dr. Doom, sorry, Paul Dipple, I'm not trying to make fun of you. You're a smart guy. He's like 20% best in class, right? And I was like, oh, okay. Like 20% for other industries is like low, right? But for our industry, that's best in class. Cool. So, so if, I assume the reason and the way people think they're going to get there is by taking the current technology of the day and just going deep end in, right? Like AI or bust. That seems to be the topic of the day. And I don't know, you follow the threads, right? X, Twitter, through Reddit, LinkedIn, all this, whatever. Everyone's talking left, right, up, down. But before I land this plane, I just saw, everybody knows Jay McBain, right? He seems to be, the in one of the industry, brain trust guys, right? He's always on stage at a conference somewhere. And I just read this 46 minutes ago, and I'm going to read it now. And hopefully this puts everything together into this next part. So this is Jay talking. And go fact check me if you don't believe it. Just polled 278 channel partners on AI readiness. Only 18% feel prepared and well supported by their vendors. That means 82% are telling us that they need more help. And the number one barrier at 32% is lack of vendor enablement. So he says, not demand, not complexity, not talent, enablement. Partners are saying AI, Partners are not saying AI isn't important. In fact, Omdia, which is the name of the company he works for, is forecasting a $267 billion AI services opportunity by 2030, growing at 35.3%. Um, they're saying their vendors haven't shown up in the right ways yet. So he says, we asked what would actually move the needle. The answers were clear. 35% want AI trainings and workshops. 21% want access to products, demos, and proof of concept resources. 17% want certifications and specializations that they can take to market. So it kind of puts it into this isn't a technology problem, it's an enablement gap. The vendors who invest in structured AI training programs, hands-on demos, and credentialed specialization paths will own the next generation of partner loyalty. The ones who drop an AI SKU into their price list and call it a strategy will watch their partners find someone else who takes enablement seriously. Cybersecurity went through this exact cycle 5 years ago. The playbook already exists. The question is which vendors will run it before their competitors do. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he's spot on. I think like, that I spent the entire morning before we got on this call actually working through some similar um, presentation materials for some other things I'm working on. And I would say that that's pretty accurate. I would think that, you know, when you're building a SaaS product of some sort, um, the theory is it's easy, it's plug and play, and it's product led sales. You sign on, you do a trial, you convert it. It takes 2 seconds. And I think the reality is that in this channel specifically, that is so far from the truth. And that approach, I think, sours honestly a lot of the experience for MSPs. And it makes this quite overwhelming in terms of how do they figure out where to place their bets. And when I say place their bets, like if we're going to go down this AI and automation path, which is not an if, it's a when, but if we're going to start now, where do we place our bets to feel like we're confident with who we're going to work with? And I think anybody who's thinking that any vendor who's approaching it as plug and play, I think their partners are probably going to struggle pretty good. I think about like, and I'll acknowledge like a solution like Pia as an example is very much an infrastructure solution for an MSP. So it's not a simple to use in terms of like there's other MSP vendors where the product is easier to plug and play. But because AI and automation is promising this amazing North Star that we're all going to get to, it is a thing that requires time investment. And the vendor does have onus and responsibility in that to make sure that they can let their partners and prospects feel comfortable and appropriately guided to have success. I mean, that's a thing that I'll say like our team spends an amount of time on that is unimaginable, but it pays off. And I think I get it. Like when we bring in AI and automation solutions internally, it's overwhelming. We know we need to do things. We know we need to strive to elevate what we're doing in certain areas of the business, but it's not an easy thing to solve. Well, in the MSP world, you're doing it across, you have multiple clients you're supporting. Like the
Mm.
complexity of that is so unique in terms of what technology you're picking that I think having a vendor that you can rely on to help guide you, support you, create workshops, more enablement is uh, it's a requirement, is what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know I mentioned the feeds, right? The Reddits, the Twitter, Facebook, all this, whatever. You know, I think sometimes we in MSP land get a little bit discombobulated um, by not paying attention to the larger IT community, right? Like there's MSP largely serving SMB or SME, I guess, depending
Hmm.
where. are in the world. And then internal IT kind of is the next step, right? The mid-market enterprise guys who they may still use MSPs for some of it, but they have enough, want and need to have internal people, right? At the center of that business from a technology standpoint. So sometimes what I do, and I think a lot of people should do, is they should go and follow some of the threads on, what the internal IT's experience is in the same categories. So 3 days ago, I stumbled upon, and this is an r/help desk on Reddit. Again, I bring all my receipts. Take it for whatever it's worth, guys, because I know I get fact checked from time to time. I don't make this stuff up. And so here's how this post goes. It says, we rolled out one of these AI help desk software a couple of months ago, thinking it would cut our ticket volume in half. Agents hyped it for auto triage and reply drafts, but now it's just adding more work. Half the tickets are getting misclassified because the intent detection sucks. His words, not mine. On anything that's not super basic, like users asking about billing edge cases or weird app glitches. Then Copilot suggests these generic replies that don't even fit, and agents waste time rewriting them anyway. Plus, the QA scoring flags every other response as low quality, even when the customers are happy, and it's flagging churn risks on active accounts that are fine. Feels like this is creating fake problems just to justify itself. We are burning cash on this, and ticket times haven't bulged. Anyone else dealing with these letdowns? What actually works without making things worse? And which one should we start looking at switching to? And so I'm just thinking when I read this, David, that like these guys are just a little bit ahead of us, right? Like
Mhm.
they maybe adopted it earlier than we did as a sandbox, and they've now matriculated through that and are like, psh, fake news didn't work out and like we need to find something better. And I totally appreciate that the speed of development right now is warp speed, right? Like if you built something 6 months ago, somebody built today's version of it with the next greatest thing. And I get that that's going to happen no matter what. But the outcome is what we're supposed to be working backwards from. And that post, I think, gets a lot of people scared.
And I think rightfully so. I mean, again, without knowing specific, and it doesn't matter who the vendor is or even who the business is, without knowing the details behind it, I think what it does is it highlights a lot of the challenges that are quite common, which are what this exposes in this post is one, how well did they vet the solution? Two, how well did that vendor show up to give them a map on how did they get to where they want to be? Like, what does that end state look like? The adoption of the tool and implementation of that. So there's an onus that falls obviously on the internal help desk. There's also an onus that falls on the vendor on how to show up to let them be successful. So I think it's a combination of a bunch of these things. I think what we're also seeing is jamming data into an LLM is not a real solution. That doesn't make your product unique. And it's not always the smartest, best way to use AI. Um, Leasing somebody else's technology without building a lot of the guardrails, framework, confidence ratings that you need to have to do some of these things um, puts your clients at risk in terms of the outcomes that they get from that. And so I think that we're starting to see a lot of that uh, you know, AI just to be AI is not always the best approach. And it can actually hurt the industry for solutions that are trying to really give a more mature offering. Um, Now, again, I don't have specifics on this one, but I think what it does is it just exposes like it could be any of these things. And it should scare people because whether it's the vendors doing, it's a shortcoming that the implementation team internally had, whatever it is, they ended up here
Yeah.
and they're scrambling and they're scared now and they're feeling like it's creating more work, not less work.
Hmm.
These tools, no matter what, require a lot of time investment. And I think that that's a thing that the market has maybe missed the mark on is the level of time involved to get to where you want to be is not small. And so if I look back on when I had my business before selling it, we put a machine learning model in place to triage tickets way before any of this stuff. Like the world looks the way it does now. This is 6 or 8 years ago. And my team, I remember our team panicking, just so panicked about this. We must have spent weeks and weeks, 6 months of hard work to get this model to where it needed to be to provide value. When we sat and we really digested it, we had a service desk of calling, 50, 70 techs. And to have a human dispatcher sitting there all day, they were making errors left and right.
Mm.
And not because they didn't know what they were doing, it's just the speed at which we were having tickets come in was way too much for somebody to keep up with. So I look back at that and I said, look, we committed 6 months to it. Like we shopped for a product that we thought could do it, and then we committed 6 months to it. And at the end of it, we got there. But
Hmm.
I think the AI promise right now is so, like, we're all under the impression you're going to get a fast result. It's going to work tomorrow. And I think we're seeing that that's falling short quite a bit.
Right, which brings me, like at the beginning of this thought, I said, all right, 15 to 20% profitability, and how do you maintain that? And you were saying, hey, when you zoom out into the larger industry, that's hard to maintain, especially through acquisitions and such. A lot of people are leaning into, well, you're going to get there by having less people. Less people mean more profit. It probably also means that it's more work for less amount of people. And how do you
Mhm.
keep those customers happy? And then you go to this, oh, I'll tell you how you're going to do it. We're going to displace L1. You get to have all your people do other, projects and money making tasks. But that's the front door, man. That's where your customers like expect 911 to answer when they're having a problem, and they don't want to text them and they don't want to talk to the computer, right? So I'm seeing the marketing message over here and like realities over here, and everybody's getting squished in between this sandwich. And somewhere behind all of this are the people who realize that they need to get to a certain profitability, benchmark in order to get the value they need out of their business in order to exit. And so you throw all that together, and it seems like it's a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah.
And I'm
Yeah,
trying to find out where we make this meet in a good place rather than crash.
I think there's a lot of pressure to get these short-term wins, but there's trade-off potentially for some long-term pains if it's done incorrectly. And so, uh, a lot of what I've been spending time on and we focus on is like practical use cases, not North Star things. I think your example of uh, it's sort of like the front line or the front desk is like 911. You expect somebody to answer. And I think about, I just in December I had this all all these horrible implications with traveling abroad.
Mm,
Okay, everything that could go wrong. Well, I should say everything. I got where I needed to safely.
this is good.
Okay, so that's the end result. I got where I needed to go, but everything in between was absolute chaos.
Mm,
Bags lost, flights delayed, flights canceled for no reasons, no the airline never showed up to give me a food credit. Meanwhile, it's like, you're spending Christmas Eve in an airport abroad,
wow.
right? So things like that. So, anyways, the level of frustration was, for me was quite extreme. But I think about something like that and I'm like, man, I didn't have an 800 number to call because the wait time was 3 hours. They don't give you an email address. I searched all over the internet to find an email address. It goes into a black hole. I didn't get a response for weeks.
Hmm.
And then you can open tickets online through their website, but I have to open for each incident. And so when you tallied up how many incidents I had, it it was like I'm going to spend 3 hours filling these out. This is crazy. So it was like that. And then I show up at the counter and there's people who missed their connection to get back to India,
Wow.
and they had to stay in the airport for 2 full days. There
Oh,
was not a flight for 2 days, and I'm like, "Man," and like, they had no option too, right? So you can see, like, all these things, and so when I think about practical use cases, you have to think about, like, how do you bring value into your company as an MSP that doesn't take away from what got you here today. And what got you here today usually is like the type of experience you give to your customers. It's it's so easy to show up when everything's going well as an MSP to your customers. It's really hard to do the right thing when everything's on fire. And I think that that's what makes MSP so unique and exciting and like successful is like the human element of them showing up when the house is on fire and acknowledging it, owning it, and going, we're going to get through this together, and making that client feel comfortable with that. Um, and I think that same thing has to be used when we start thinking about where do we implement AI and automation. It has to be to make the experience better, not to take away the human element that your customers have come to love and depend on. And so it's just finding the right mix of that ultimately.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting, especially with the hey, I'm gonna be a like let me go backwards. All the big companies that have implemented this in major enterprises who are now laying off 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people. I understand in my from where I sit, my opinion is that they were able to play Moneyball with just a much larger number, right? And so hey, if I got a department with 1,000 people and I save 5 or 10% of time per person, and then I can accumulate to entire people that way, that's how I ultimately decide how to shrink a department, not blow it away and just have the computer run the whole thing, right? I mean, there's the inverted effect of that, which is I think a couple weeks ago I read an article that the last 9 Amazon AWS major outages were because the code checkers weren't checking the AI generated code, which led to an infrastructure outage unexpected.
Sure.
And then they go back to be like, well, those code checkers would have been there if we hadn't laid them off. And then like full circle, right? So I was like, huh, interesting. So I feel like everybody's kind of still experimenting with this whole conversation. It's just the bigger guys are doing it in a much more meaningful way when you have thousands of people attached to it. I don't think the same game can be played at the sub 10 person company. I just think that you're putting yourself in very much harm's way if you eliminate, like, if you have a 10-person company, you take two people out, it's 20% of your workforce. That might not be good for you. It may be dramatic because you're just a small company. You can't afford
Yep.
the same thing. So like how do you get that message across so that people who are still skittish, right? They don't understand what to do. What is the right investment to make? What should I latch on to? They're being told, "Oh, you can run your whole thing with like two people, three people, five people." And it's like I don't understand how that's really achievable.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, and I'll come back to the 10-person shop in a second, but we've seen some of the bigger groups throw some pretty big money at this. You alluded to a couple at the beginning of this conversation, and we'll see how it pans out. We actually haven't seen how it pans out yet.
Mm.
It's so early in this. The theory is so great on paper. How it pans out in reality is, I think, left to be seen, and it'll be interesting. What I would say is how we've approached it, whether it's a 10, 20-person shop or it's a 100-person shop, has been pretty consistent, which is we're just trying to elevate folks so that they don't like what's happening right now is your techs have hit the ceiling. They can't grow, they can't expand, they can't work on the things that are interesting to them
Right.
because they are firefighting all day,
Yeah.
right? And I think that MSP has every intention to grow. Nobody's in business to just stay the same or to shrink. And if it's just to stay the same, you end up shrinking because that's just unfortunately how the world works.
Mm.
So they're all of the intention of growing. Well, maybe you could take on 20% more business with the same 10 people.
Yeah.
It's very possible, right? And so it's how do you elevate them and how do you have the business more structurally sound to grow, not how do you get rid of people. I think that message I think is a little dangerous to your point. And I think look, in a 10 or 20-person shop, when somebody opens a ticket in your help desk, they're not calling MSP ABC. they're calling George. And they're like,
Yeah.
I got George on the phone. That's who I talk to every day. To get rid of George has serious impacts for that customer's experience. And it's not advisable by any means. And then you also have to remember, then you have like smaller shops tend to have a customer saturation issue. Not to what extent varies, but there's always usually like one customer that carries a lot of weight
Yeah.
as a percentage of revenue. So how do you balance that? And I think it's keeping that human element there.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. Um, every time I've seen, at least in the last 4 to 6 months, every security questionnaire that's passed through my mailbox has a whole section now dedicated to AI and just a whole bunch of questions about what are you using, how are you using it, how do you know that, things are being safeguarded. And I know what they want the answers to be, but I just got to come to the realization that the answers are we're doing our best, but we don't know. I got to think that that's kind of where the plane lands because it's it's morphing at such a ridiculously fast pace that I don't even know the companies who are offering all these technologies, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, all those guys, right? So many of them now. I don't even know if they can safeguard to the point that they claim they can because it's just moving fast. Like, how do you help people get past that mentally, right? Because for the last 5 years, as Mr. McBain pointed out, we've been in cybersecurity land and this has
Mm.
become beaten into everyone. And now we're in a whole new frontier and it's almost like we forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to ask, and I think it's an interesting question. I think if you were to ask MSP owners over the last several years before, called the last 18, 24 months, what keeps them up at night, it would be I'm beyond scared of a cyber attack of some sort to my business.
Hmm.
I don't think that that has changed, but I think the AI risk has elevated also. And so now you're not just up at night thinking about a cyber attack, you're also up at night thinking about where sensitive data being put that it potentially shouldn't be put.
Hmm.
And then you go on TikTok or Instagram or any of these social media things and you see the number of jokes of like, don't mind me just putting in sensitive company data into my personal chat GPT. And it's like, it's funny to see, but as an owner or as an executive, it's terrifying.
Right.
Um, Sadly, I think the answer is a lot of companies are still figuring it out. Like we do everything we can to safeguard data. We do everything we can to stay like, be very compliant. If you look at the vendors, a lot of the vendors like mine as an example, we focus very much on being compliant with you know, um, certain regulatory things that, or getting SOC 2 or getting whatever it may be. And those we do all the right things,
Hmm.
and yet you could still have bad actors or folks who just do things inadvertently, not realizing the risk of them. And there's unfortunately risk to that. And that number, I mean, that just gets significantly worse and more concerning the bigger a company gets because the number of people that could make that mistake becomes so much bigger. But I do think sadly it's still a bit of like we're figuring it out as an industry as a whole, or as a world as a whole, I should say, not even just this industry. And, we'll unfortunately probably see something pretty bad happen somewhere. And it'll be a really, really big lesson on this is why you don't do that. Now, to this point, I haven't seen anything, and maybe it'd be interesting to see if you have, but I haven't seen anything that's exposed anything seriously out of like one of the big LLM players yet, where something bad has happened. However, if you look at like what Anthropic just built and decided to not go public with,
I saw
um,
that. Mythos.
yeah, that's an indicator. If they figured it out, others will figure it out, right? And expose vulnerabilities that nobody else could find. So we're in this very interesting, concerning period of time. And I think we just all as individuals have to just be really wise and smart about where do I as an individual put data, and how safe and secure am I being, and just
Well,
hope that everybody takes that approach. But we know that that's not
we know for a
realistic.
fact that is not the approach
Yeah.
because I can tell you several times I've run into in the same places I'm reading the stuff from today. I'm I'm canceling my PSA.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to use? Oh, I built my own. What? Oh yeah, I vibe coded it. I was like, so what else is next? You gotta vibe code the RMM. You gotta vibe code your remote access tool. You gotta vibe code your security endpoint software on your computer. Like, what are we talking about? And like, it seems like people are thinking this is a thing, and this is where I start getting worried about. Hey, you can point the finger at your up, pick your vendor if there's a problem that on the product that they built, but if you built it on your own, nobody's going to look anywhere else other than you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this vibe coding thing is has a lot of inherent risk in it in so many ways. It's not just the security element, which I do think is quite concerning. It is also the sustainability of it.
Yeah.
The CEO who just is like, oh, I'm going to go build a new ticketing system so I can get rid of my TSM, and just dumps it on a team of people to go, now you use this tool and own it. To maintain that, to have the change management in place, to keep updating it, to keep evolving it, they have no chance. And that's one tool. How many SaaS tools do we subscribe to, right? I
Dozens.
I can't even count them all. And so I think the idea of reinventing the wheel, trying to build something from scratch that already exists, doesn't make sense. I think where vibe coding really fits in and is an amazing tool is doing something that becomes unique and proprietary to your business,
Okay.
not just replacing a tool, but doing something that elevates your tools. And I think that that's where I think there's an opportunity. We'll still see how that all pans out, but I think that that is an opportunity. And that's the same thing we've been seeing for the last 30 years with companies putting in DevOps teams, right? Of some sort. They're doing something that's proprietary and unique to their business. They're not going to market and selling it. They're just trying to have an edge on their competition, right? A better way of doing things, but they didn't go build a PSA or ticketing system most of the time. By the way, that said, having been in companies who have built their own PSAs, it is a very, very burdensome to continue to maintain that, to have it still be leading from a capability perspective. And then if you ever consider migrating off of that, good luck.
Mhm. Yeah, I can already remember the conversations where it's like, I'm moving from this PSA to this PSA. And I was like, okay. I was like, I think everything's gonna come over. I'm like, it won't. I was like, you're probably gonna end up keeping like the minimum number of users online to keep that other thing still around in case you need to go back, because it won't. They're like, what do you mean? They're promising. I was like, I don't care who's promising. It's just never going to be 100%, brother. It's just unless you can put it into the dumpster, light it on fire, never to be touched again, you gotta need to go back at some point and refer. And I'm sorry if you were told differently. And I have no skin in the game. I'm just telling you, I've seen this too many times. And they're like, no, 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 it's gonna be good. And it never is good.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're at a point right now where it's hard to even have a singular agent that you build from scratch that doesn't need to be constantly tweaked and evolved. We're
Hmm.
not even at that point. That does one thing really well for a short period and then it breaks
Yeah.
quickly later because it requires ongoing support and maintenance of it. I don't think the trade-offs end up panning out that well for trying to replicate tools that we already know work quite well that you can buy off the shelf.
Oh, but it'll make me so much more profitable because I'm gonna just be able to cancel, 25 grand a month in SaaS
Yeah,
tools.
right.
I mean, this is definitely where the idea is from, right? But yeah, like we're talking in this whole session here, right? We're like on one side of the spectrum, you got the bleeding edge. Let's just play toys, which is great, by the way. I'm a toy guy, yeah, to some degree. On the other side, you got the hey, let's not do anything rash. I don't want to put our company in jeopardy. And then everybody else is in between, right? That's the guy Jay McBain's been talking about, which is like, I understand it's there. I get it. The marketing's telling me I need to adopt it. I really just haven't 83%, whatever it was. And like
Yeah. I
Like
think that
pretty
gets
slow.
I think that gets back to like, that middle ground is practical solutions. And when we say practical, like what feels really attainable to your company? What are the KPIs that you're going to track to know like this was successful or it failed?
Yeah.
And time to value, I think, is important. So as we get back to that enablement piece of the whole process, that's ultimately delivering time to value, right? If it takes 6 months or a year to do something, gosh, the attention span that we have, this industry has, it's hard to commit that long. It's just tough. We have how many MSPs is the CEO or the owner still doing billable work, right?
Oh,
It's
a
all
lot.
over the place. So in
Yeah.
what world do we think that you can commit 6 or 12 months to rolling something out? I think we need to be more realistic that it needs to be 30, 45 days, 60 days to get value out of something with a very clear map on how you get there. And I think with that, it becomes easily digestible. Beyond that, I think is where it gets very overwhelming and in the clouds.
Hard to get how hard to have that timetable on something you're building, while you're watching Netflix.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, I know you're talking about two different situations, but it's not that far off when you overlap these themes, right? This way. Um, Definitely interesting. So from Pia's perspective, right? Like Pia's been around now for a while. You're not brand new, but you're also not super old, right? I think it's
Sure.
been like 3, 4 years, something like that. Um, if somebody were going out to solve like two, three, four problems, why would Pia be the first at the top of the list to look at? What would those things be?
Yeah. So I think a few things. And look, our entry point into the market and what P is very well known for is service desk or service delivery automation.
Okay.
I think it's a few things. One, we embed ourselves in a PSA. So the tools that they're already using, like we are so focused on time to adoption and how to make adoption as easy as possible. We didn't want to introduce a new tool to use, so we very purposely designed it to be a certain way. Um, Two is time to value. So much of what we focus on is how do we provide automations that are available that work basically day one,
Hmm.
but how can you still customize them to fit unique client scenarios that come up without having to maintain and build something from scratch? So we've done a really good job of balancing that. And then I think three is like it's practical implementation of a tool like this. So we start pretty phased approaches. We look at as an example, let's start there. You need help with these key level one tickets, and we'll look at your real ticket data to assess like what you think and what reality is. Let's make sure they match up. And they often do. Like smaller MSPs know that quite well. But let's make sure it all ties back together. And then we'll start there and implement them and make sure you get going quickly. And the whole idea is like, man, can we get you 30 days later, 45 days later to actually start already seeing value out of a product? Because if you can get that to happen, then there's buy-in to go, oh, we're on the right path. We set a small milestone that's already delivering significant results. Now let's continue to grow here. And I think that's where like a lot of the structure of what we've built around PIA, like I said, our entry point was originally service desk automation. It's expanded so much beyond that. So it's all these tools that we give you to basically automate all the things in your MSP, operational things, finance things, and so on, giving you a path to that and working along. That's like what I would say to your question is, why do partners come to us? Is we can give them a map that gets them there in a realistic amount of time where they're still committed and bought in and can commit the resources to it.
Interesting. One thing that I've seen, I don't know, pretty regularly, for whatever it's worth, is the data in the system is not good. Like the data in the system
Hmm.
has been relying on people to put good information in, and I think we can probably agree that you know, that's only going to be as good as the person is interested in putting the system in, and most people are not. So when you get things like fixed it, it's working now, that kind of like very short, almost meaningless data, I don't know how that helps, going backwards to figure out how to go forwards.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. It's also like documenting in IT Glue or another tool, right? Like this client, when we onboard a user, we do this, and how many MSPs have had to redo a documentation implementation, right? Or go back and constantly update them. Somehow, no matter how many initiatives there are, they're often out of date, and that's not the tool's fault. That's just the reality of this industry. It's really hard to keep up with. Um, I think that that's where tools like automation come in, is because we can can't get missed. So if you need to give somebody a very specific, let's say, line of business application that's very unique to that company, there should be a step in that automation to make sure that that gets checked. Uh, and I also think that another obstacle to the point around documentation and just sort of language as a whole is the way that people submit tickets and requests. What I say I need help with, I could use completely the wrong terminology. I'm just like, I don't know, my phone doesn't get email. I've explained nothing, right? Um, think having tools that understand natural language, can comprehend that, and but to be safe, also have a confidence scoring or rating or control built into them, allow MSPs to get where they need to go sooner. And so it's sort of, again, it's that stepping stone to getting where they need to. It's not go automate everything day one and it's like set it and forget it. None of this works that way. I think this is a gradual process, and then you see that hockey stick growth from once you hit a certain point.
Yeah, I hope everybody who listens to this episode um takes that, at least that point away, right? Like nothing is going to be instant 1 minute fix here, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got to have to put some time in, which comes back to I think the very important other part, which is, man, I adoption, right? Like how many tools has people bought from the trade show floor, whatever it is, and that I think 6 months is that magic marker, by the way. It's about when people
Mhm.
finally look at their credit card statement to see what they're paying for, and they're like, I don't think I'm using this anymore. Cancel, right? And like that's usually the demarcation point in my mind. If they haven't actually implemented it and turned it on in that 6 month window, they're going to cancel it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that that seems about right. And again, it's hard to stay committed to something also if you haven't seen anything tangible out of 6 months of work.
No, that's fair. 100%. Where I know Pia is out and about, right? Like we're gonna see you guys and have been seeing you on the road. So like think about, I started this session with, hey, let's just get to the end of June. Where do you think we're gonna see Pia out in the world?
A lot of the events you just alluded to will definitely be at. So the Kaseya event will be at, well, there's one week in particular that stands out to me because there's 4 or 5 different events we'll be at, but Kaseya in Vegas will be at um, the Evolve events, ConnectWise Evolve events. There's a tag event, the tag purchasing group. So we'll be at an event there, actually in Vegas at the same time as the Kaseya event.
Wow.
Um, and then we'll be at PAX 8 Beyond in early June. We just launched actually just about a week ago in PAX 8 in the marketplace. So we're really excited about that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I,
We're
I I
really
know that's a
excited.
lot of work to get to that point.
That it was a lot of work, and I'm excited to see it all pan out. But it was quite a significant investment of time for sure.
Absolutely.
Um, so that kind of takes us through June, and then we'll be at the Prague event that you mentioned also. So we're busy, and then we get a little break in maybe August, just enough to like get sunburned at the beach and in the US, and then back at it in fall.
Yeah, it is. I call this time of the year, David. I don't know if people adopt my terminology. So I call the end of September, October, and then like pretty much halfway into November, I call that the gauntlet. That's, in my opinion, the absolute busiest time in those weeks and any other time. But I like to call what we're about to go into right now the mini gauntlet.
Hmm.
It's close, but it's not quite the end of the year.
Yeah, it's actually it's sort of like baseball, right? It's like the season just kicked off, right?
Mhm.
Baseball, and there's so much excitement, and that's what we're entering. But like, really, it's all about playoffs. Like, we have to maintain really well, and then the moment fall hits, it's like, all right, this is what you trained all year for.
100%. I agree. I like that one. I like that one a lot. Yeah, playoffs, playoffs,
Yes.
playoffs. I like it. Um, how do people find more information about PIA and if they want to drop you a note? Because seems like you've been around the block a few times, and maybe they just want to pick your brain, from some of the stuff we talked about
Yep.
today. How do they find you?
Personally, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can just look me up there. But PIA is also quite active. I mean, we have our website is pia.ai, so pia.ai. We're pretty active there. We're actively posting things on LinkedIn. We're at most of the events in the industry. We try to get to as many as we can. So those are the easiest ways to definitely track us down. DMing me on LinkedIn is by far and away the easiest way to get my attention. And I like interacting with people. I'm fairly active there. So reach out.
No, this was great. David, thanks for taking an hour out of your day. I know you're a busy guy and you got a lot to do, but love hearing the um, homegrown, you've been in the trench as an MSP experience, right? I think that's really important to somebody in your seat because that's
Yeah.
what makes the most successful vendors in the sandbox, in my opinion, work, right? It's somebody from the inside, not the outside.
Yep. I appreciate it. I'm glad I was able to join, and thanks for having me, George.
All right, guys. Guys, this session was recorded. MSPinitiative.com. That'll link you to all the places that you can, replay, download, forward, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Looking forward to seeing everybody on the road. Thanks for jumping on. Catch you on the next one.